I own 2,300 acres of raw land in state. Sounds powerful, right? That's what I thought too until I discovered that an entire HOA community of 400 homes had been quietly operating on top of my property for 11 years. Their HOA board, their security gates, their little welcome sign, their perfectly paved entrance road, all of it sitting on land that legally, on paper, belonged to me. Not them. Me. Now here's the part that nobody talks about in real estate school. I didn't threaten anyone. I didn't call a lawyer first. I didn't demand anything. I just quietly made them an offer they couldn't refuse, and when they refused it anyway, I sold their entrance to someone else. And that someone else? He had absolutely no interest in keeping that road open. If you want to know how a 400-home HOA community nearly lost their only way in or out, smash that like button right now and don't you dare leave before the end of this video. This story gets much, much worse for them before it gets better. Welcome to Neighbor Wars HQ. This all started with a land auction back in year. I had been quietly buying rural parcels for about 6 years at that point. Tax-delinquent properties, estate sales, county auctions, the kind of land most investors don't even bother to walk. My strategy has always been simple. Buy land that looks like nothing on a satellite image, because nothing is usually hiding something worth having. Timber, mineral rights, water, easement value. The world underprices land it can't immediately picture a Starbucks on. So when a 2,300-acre parcel in state came up at a county tax sale for a number that I will not say out loud because you wouldn't believe me, I bid on it. I was the only bidder. That should have been my first clue that something unusual was going on with this property, but at the time, I chalked it up to the fact that most people at tax sales are chasing small residential lots, not large rural parcels with no immediate development potential. I took the deed, had a surveyor out within 60 days, and filed the paperwork. That was that, or so I thought. For the first 2 years, I didn't think about this parcel at all. It sat in my portfolio like hundreds of other rural acres I hold across different states. I received the annual tax bills, I paid them, and I moved on. The land was generating some low-level timber income from a lease I'd inherited, and that was the extent of my involvement. I had no idea that while I was paying property taxes on 2,300 acres of land, a fully functioning residential community was operating on top of most of it. The moment that unraveled the whole situation was completely accidental. I was reviewing a boundary survey I'd commissioned for an adjacent parcel of completely unrelated business when my surveyor called me with a tone of voice I had never heard from him before. He said, and I am quoting him almost exactly, "You have a subdivision sitting inside your property. Did you know that?" I did not know that. Nobody knew that. Or rather, somebody had known that, and they had been very careful to make sure nobody looked too closely at the chain of title. What had happened, as far as we could piece it together with a real estate attorney, was this. A developer had platted a subdivision on a large parcel of land about 12 years prior. During the development process, a survey error, whether intentional or negligent, we never definitively proved resulted in the legal description of the HOA's common ground and entrance parcels being incorrectly recorded. When that developer's company dissolved and its remaining land assets were liquidated at a tax auction, the parcel I purchased included portions of land that the HOA genuinely believed they owned outright. But belief and legal title are two different things. Entirely. The HOA's own attorney, when we finally disclosed the situation to them, used the phrase, catastrophic title defect. Their title insurance company used a different phrase. Their title insurance company used the phrase, "We need to talk." 3 months and 2 independent title searches later, there was no ambiguity. The entrance road, the gated security structure, the common area landscaping, and approximately 180 acres of what the HOA had been calling their community green space, all sat on land with my name on the deed. I want to be honest about my intentions going into the negotiation phase, because this part of the story matters for the ending. I am a real estate investor, not a villain. I have no interest in displacing 400 families or making people's lives miserable. When I retained counsel and approached the HOA board, my initial proposal was straightforward and, in my opinion, extremely fair given the circumstances. I would sell them the disputed parcels, the entrance road, the gate structures, and the common area land at a price that was approximately 30% below appraised market value. I was getting a haircut. I was making it easy for them. I wanted this resolved without anyone ending up on the evening news. The HOA board's response was not what I expected. Rather than engaging seriously with my offer, they hired an aggressive litigation firm and immediately filed for an emergency injunction to cloud the title and prevent me from making any transactions while the matter was in dispute. Their legal strategy, as it became clear over the following weeks, was to bury me in litigation costs until I gave up or settled for an amount that was essentially nothing. They had 400 households paying HOA dues. They had deep pockets. They seemed to believe that I would fold. What they did not know and what I did not tell them was that I had been contacted 3 weeks earlier by a private equity land fund that was actively acquiring rural parcels in that county as part of a larger land banking strategy. That fund had no particular interest in the HOA entrance. They had interest in the acreage that surrounded it. But when I explained the full situation to their acquisitions director, his exact response was, "We'll take it all, including the entrance, including the gated road, including the easement that gave 400 homes their only legal access to the public highway." The closing happened on a Tuesday morning. I am not going to disclose the exact sale price, but I will tell you that between the acreage value, the strategic premium for the easement control, and several provisions the buyer insisted on related to the HOA situation, I walked away from that closing having made significantly more than I would have made selling directly to the HOA at any reasonable price. The buyer was not a vindictive man. He was simply a businessman who understood leverage, and what he had just purchased was an extraordinary amount of it. The HOA's attorney received formal notice the following morning. Within 72 hours, the HOA board had called an emergency meeting. By the end of that week, the same board that had filed an injunction against me and publicly accused me of acting in bad faith had reached out to the new owner with a completely different posture. They were no longer interested in litigation. They were interested in a deal. Any deal. The new owner, who had no existing relationship with them and no reason to offer a discount, sold them the entrance parcels at full appraised value plus a sizable premium for what his attorney described as access certainty. The HOA paid for it. They had no other option. You cannot serve 400 homes with no legal road in. The total amount the HOA spent to resolve a situation they could have resolved with me for 30% less when you add their legal fees, the premium on the final land purchase, and the emergency special assessment they levied against every homeowner to cover the costs was, by their own board's accounting, just over amount. Every single homeowner in that community paid a special assessment that could have been avoided entirely if the board had simply negotiated in good faith when they had the chance. I did not gloat, but I will not pretend I did not notice. There is a lesson buried in this story that has nothing to do with revenge or real estate tricks, and I want to make sure you hear it clearly before we close out. The HOA board made a series of decisions that seemed rational from a short-term defensive posture: lawyer up, delay, apply pressure, wait out the opponent, but each of those decisions compounded the problem rather than solving it. They treated a negotiable real estate dispute as an adversarial war. And when you turn a negotiable problem into a war, you lose control of how that war ends. For anyone watching this who owns land, buys land, or lives in a community with shared access infrastructure, get a title search done on every parcel that matters to your daily life. Not just when you buy periodically. Title defects are not rare. They are shockingly common, particularly in communities developed on land that passed through multiple ownership entities before the final plat was recorded. Survey errors, clerical mistakes in legal descriptions, improperly recorded easements. These problems exist quietly inside the records of thousands of communities across the country, and most of them will never surface until someone like me buys the wrong parcel at a tax auction and has an unusually thorough surveyor. And for anyone who is watching this because you are currently in a neighbor dispute, a property dispute, or a situation where someone has come to you with an offer you think you can outmaneuver, please hear me on this. The person sitting across the table from you almost always has more options than you can see. When someone makes you a reasonable offer, the correct response is rarely to file an injunction. The correct response is to look very carefully at what they could do instead of selling to you, because if what they could do is worse, and you give them no other choice, they are going to do it. That is not cruelty. That is math. If the story was different for you, if you found yourself thinking, I would have done exactly what that HOA board did, and now you're rethinking that, that is exactly why this channel exists. Neighbor Wars HQ is not just about wild property stories. It is about understanding power, leverage, and the legal realities of land ownership that nobody teaches you in school, in HOA orientation packets, or in most real estate courses. We cover the cases, the laws, the mistakes, and yes, the absolute chaos that happens when property lines and human ego collide. If you are new here, subscribe right now. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next one, because I have 3 more stories in the pipeline that make this one look like a parking dispute. One involves a man who legally landlocked an entire city block. One involves an HOA that tried to foreclose on someone's home over a basketball hoop and lost spectacularly. And one involves an easement fight that went all the way to a state Supreme Court, and the outcome is not what anybody expected. You do not want to find out about those videos from someone else's comment section. Subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Final screen CTA. Like, subscribe, comment, entrance. If you would have taken the deal, share with that one friend who thinks HOAs are untouchable. Watch next.